Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings Here. In a semi-confused state of mind, frankly. Yeah, so every time you go thinking about videos and how you're going to introduce them or start them, however you want to look at it, it's, stuff runs through your mind and you say, well, no, I really can't talk about that because it's too personal, or oh no, getting to it from that angle is too political, so anyway, it was time to hit the button. So I am less than convinced on what the introduction should exactly be, so I guess we'll just get to the video that's on the website. So you do have to explain such things that you actually have to go to a link that is below to actually watch the video. Okay, it's an hour and a half. So there's lots of stuff in there that's not going to be in this. Well, not lots of stuff, just more about the stuff, probably, mostly. So when I made that video, I was a little bit in between subjects. I sort of wanted to just finish critiquing, analyzing some of the arguments the other anti-natalists are making based on what they presented at their convention thing. And yeah, so there was an argument about this distinction between being an anti-natalist and being an extinctionist, and the only distinction is one of the words doesn't sound so bad and one of them sounds horrible, pretty much. I could argue they both are horrible for reasons. Natalist is all kind of query and weird as a word, and extinction just doesn't. That just sounds bad. It just doesn't sound good. So okay. So I could just argue the semantics or the poetry of what's written on the placard, or the way it's written. It's sort of like somebody could have a sign about no more nukes, or some kind of thing they're advocating for, and they could just write it sloppy and it just looks ridiculous, and it just kind of makes their argument look lazy and sloppy, and all that kind of stuff. Or they could be dressed like a big, they could, all that little crap can matter to people. And I have to concede, I don't pay much attention to most of that stuff, because I figure the only people listening to me are people who are capable of stepping way past worrying about those kind of triggers, let's call them. So anyway, yeah. So the video was, sort of that subject, but I wanted to kind of get to the deeper subject, which was the fact that we're all just sitting here, living out a story, and we're the writer, we're the narrator. Most all of the story, frankly, is an internal book. It can only be read by the writer, and I can't really, even though it's being written, I can't really hand you the book. You can get some feel for it externally, but you can't get a feel for it internally. Now, they play tricks with movies, where they sort of make you feel like you're the character, whether the character is a dog or a rat or whatever it is, and you get a feel for being almost as if you are John Malkovich, that you are inside that entity, and you're living, its emotions and its feelings, and what's happening to it and all of that crap. But frankly, none of that can any part of us really be preserved. None of us, it's all going to be a synthetic, AI produced, CGI fakery. Any representation, any sense you might have of knowing me, it's going to be pretty synthetic and pretty fake, because only I know me, and every person looks out at their life and their battles, and they have their perception of their conquest and their what lands they've acquired and whatever, and they're standing on their cliff like in The Lion King or something. They're rock looking, surveying their accomplishments, and yeah, it's all internal. Frankly, you really can't. Nobody else can really understand. They can just see some idiot standing on a rock, smiling, going, or drinking champagne, whatever, because it's the new year. Doing some ritual, participating in the human experience in some way. It's kind of trivial, and you just imagine it from your perspective. You really don't imagine it as they're living it, frankly. So, so that to me is a more interesting way of visualizing and contextualizing your existence, and realizing that extinction's already in the game. Just all the books are burned. I mean, they all go extinct. Every bit of all of this experience is just, and it's even true, sadly, in kind of some very negative ways, in that people who lived lives you might call extraordinary, they had extraordinary battles, like a Newton or something. And what I found is people will, re-describe these characters and turn them into all kinds of different things that weren't them at all anyway. And so the book that's preserved, their life is preserved. It's preserved in pieces and quote mines, and it really isn't the truth either. And just one more little piece of dismal to pile on the big heap of dismal truths regarding existence is the dismal truth that even if you're preserved, it probably won't be an honest or true preservation. It'll be missing something important. All right, so there's some more context. So the video does have more than one subject, and I guess you could argue. But how much continuity it has, who knows? But we'll find out by hitting the button. Go have this adventure, and sadly, the adventures all end, not so great. The youth thing is kind of charming. Yes, and it all turns to shit, and you're grasping to just keep what you have. So you go through the period of acquisition and conquest, and then it just becomes this laborious, tedious business of just trying to keep it, just trying to hold on to it, just trying to preserve it, trying to keep it from rotting and molding. And it's all kind of sad. And yes, some people can get through it because they have pretty low expectations, and so they just drift through the transitions of life and just play some music and pretend the seasons are changing and la 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 la. And others, myself, reject that acceptance and say, I deserved better, I want better. If you're going to bother making somebody else, they should have better. Something like that. Your weaknesses and your strengths. And so, we all think we're winning, I guess you could argue. Everybody's thinking to some extent they're, in the fight, and, Yeah, I guess that's all they have to be. That's the minimum that satisfies people, is that, well, I'm still here. They're cut to pieces. They're whittled down to almost nothing. But yes, they're still here, so they still have a mouth. They'll still talk. It's kind of a Monty Python kind of skit with the knights. And the one guy gets whittled down to nothing, and he's, still got an attitude. He's still winning. He still smited his adversary, even though he decidedly lost. And so people will just do that. They'll just keep recovering from complete defeat. And so they can just keep watching their kids die and say, let's do it again. Just beyond my imagination, how they contrive this capacity to undo failure. I mean, deep, hard failure.
They tear me up. So maybe I'm just too...
So just pointing out that, yes, I couldn't give a shit about this notion of extinction. I mean, my personal extinction occupies some attention. I'm concerned that I die appropriately, whatever, well, not badly. These things do concern me. It concerns me for other people, that they also have this capacity to minimize the horror for themselves personally. But the idea of extincting book writing, getting rid of writing stories for other people, I just can't, I can't read their books. I can only superficially see the covers, and none of the covers impress me. There's nothing I feel, oh, gee, I'm going to get so upset if they don't write another book like that. If they don't produce another redundant storytelling bullshit story, oh, how tragic. No, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna cry for that Argentina. So, extinction, fine. It's good.
So I'll find the video I'm supposed to be responding to. Yeah.
Alright, so that's just a little bit of video details. Okay, so now we begin. The Mari Hari guy talking about some contrived controversy over the distinction between antinatalism and extinction, when obviously you kind of understand if you're against creating people, then you stop creating them, then there won't be any. Yeah, okay. I mean, that 2 + 2 everybody should be able to handle. I mean, if you're an antinatalist, yes, you're an extinctionist. And then, the real question is shouldn't it all be extinct? Not the books written in English that are somewhat coherent and intelligent versus the incoherent, crazy books written by retarded animals. Well, let's keep those stories. No, that would be really dumb. I mean, if you know that you can't justify the stories that can make some sense, how can you sit there and say, well, we should keep the stories that make no sense?
It's just so, I'd almost argue that's almost too much explanation. Why bother explaining? Just state what you're arguing as observations of the truth.
Yes, that's all this is. It's just defining a truth, and then who cares about anything about how we get there? I mean, it's all pragmatic. You should have some conversation about appropriate mechanisms of democratic, process, and all this shit should be in there. Let's do it the legal way, that kind of crap. But the bottom line is, if it's going to come down to you're the only person that's at the controls of the plane, and you can't take a vote, okay, there's no time for that. Can't take a survey says, okay, you got no time for that shit. You got no time to argue it in Parliament. You have to make a decision, turn right or turn left. And so bottom line is, everybody's entitled to use their best judgment and apply it, frankly. They're entitled to at least having that respected when there is no alternative, because no decision is an insult to our hard-earned intelligence.
All right, so that one's another one. In all honesty, it just kind of depends. If I don't exist, then there's one less person making arguments against.
So yes, the fear of your own extinction. So the idea of your story ending. I don't know how that could ever be. I would think that most all people feel some sense of incompleteness, that everything isn't in its right place. I haven't got everything in the right drawer. There is a, in little ways my life is incomplete, and then in some bigger ways it's incomplete because yes, I haven't finished this task of being a a person against drunk procreation. You know, the cause. You know, we haven't won yet, and so you know, there's a sense of you know, I need to be here to finish what I'm doing. But yeah, beyond that, there's no fear of being dead. There's just this sense of my job is underdone. I haven't finished the painting, so to speak. And clearly, if you associate how you die with being dead, clearly I haven't figured out. You know, I haven't gotten a clear pathway to the exit door for myself yet. I haven't figured out what's my satisfactory solution.
Without further specifications.
All right, so these are all little, you know, I'd say kind of useless points. How
Making distinctions between, you know, vegans must be anti-natalists, or this has to be that, or if you believe this, you have to believe that. Certainly there could be some logical conundrums you could draw up where, well, you really don't have any alternative. And so you could argue that, yes, if you're an anti-natalist, you have to at least acknowledge that extinction is a likely outcome. You have to say that minimum. But I don't know if there's, you know, I don't know whether it matters obliging people to become comfortable with words they might be uncomfortable with, I guess you could argue. So anti-natalist is good enough. I don't need the person to be pro-extinction.
rude, obnoxious, cruel, sadistic, and evil. You don't have a right to torture anything.
Yeah, so I think I was basically arguing that the only argument that matters in here is this sort of this consent argument and the fact that you can't get it. And we already know that it's a whole bunch of people that are going to be feel imposed upon. It's like as if you injected cancer into them. It's as if you gave them something that you imposed on them, a substantial burden. You hacked their arm off. And that aggrievement, that trespass, is real, and you have to justify it. So you have to point out what the human accomplishment is. You know, what the existence of humans accomplishes. That is, what it fixes that it didn't create. What mess does it clean up that it didn't make? That's what you have to find if you're going to make an argument. And that, to me, is what I call the song and dance. There's no, there isn't anything. Only somebody with pretty lowbrow taste, okay, could find the dance in the song that the human race is singing to be anything but shitty noise. They couldn't turn this into anything elegant and beautiful and worthy of preservation. It's such a pigsty, so to speak. It's just so wretchedly poor have we done being here. You know, so inefficiently, so Black Death, that, oh, please. It's ridiculous to even have an argument about how you can justify imposing on anything for this. That you would torture anything to preserve this monument to waste and selfish indulgence.
You have to do what you think is best because it's a real decision.
All right, so this is sort of, I think, just a lifeboat argument. I mean, you know, there's points where, yes, you can have a democracy on the lifeboat, and everybody can be pulled, and we can all be nice and, you know, but try to be all polite about who gets thrown to the sharks, and just explain to everybody, well, look, the boat's going to sink. Somebody has to be fed to the sharks, or the boat sinks, and we all lose. So we have a choice. We can win, or we can make losing the definite decision. Everybody loses. So some can win or everybody loses. Which choice do you want? Or you just have a dictator with a gun who just says, fuck all of you jackasses. I'm going to do the best I can because I'm smarter than you and none of you are proving yourself capable, so I'll do it. I'll drive this fucking bus. And yeah, it's not an easy drive, frankly. It's not easy to keep the bus from hitting the brick wall, but it's doable. But it can't be done by a bunch of backseat drivers.
extinctionism and antinatalism.
I just don't know how you would separate antinatalism in the reverse sense from extinctionism. Obviously, extinctionism is...
Okay, so as I already pointed out, it's obviously just not a pretty word. But anyway,
clearly would be very unhappy, okay, if you played your Frankenstein game with...
Yeah, so I'm just using other metaphors for this consent argument and this idea that the testimony is already there. The brains have spoken, and you have no way of preventing, when you're going to do your, let's make a monster, you have no way of preventing you from creating this monster, from putting an abnormal brain in the monster. But you can't tell looking at the, the atmosphere that, oh, I know what I'm doing and I'm going to prevent it from being unhappy and I'm going to make sure that it thinks everything is swell and great and it's going to love to watch football and it's going to have one of those big, foam fingers, #1, and it's, it's going to write letters in blue on its big fat belly and it's all going to be happy, happy, happy and drink beer and blah, 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 blah. Well, you can't see that on the brain before you make the human. Okay, you don't know what you're going to get. So it's clearly an insanely reckless disregard, a disrespect for dissent and the fact that you are frankly going to impose. You're going to hurt people. Fact. You're defending it as a ideology, as a human behavior. Let's play reckless games with other people's sensibilities and vulnerabilities. Let's force them to be terrified again. It's just plainly cruel and rude.
These titles, obviously somebody's not really, it's like saying, again, you can make the rape argument. You can say, okay,
all right, so we're just getting into the I'm personally not a natalist. Well, so what? It's not an interesting philosophical perspective. Your personal preferences and tastes. That's not the subject. The subject is whether or not, it's not whether you like watching dog fights. It's whether you understand that it's cruel, horrible, awful, expensive human behavior, that it can't be justified because it costs the dignity of the animal way too much. It's too big a disgrace and insult against the dignity of our own sentient capacity to squander and waste it in such a manner.
That they had to watch 8 out of 10 of their kids die.
So that's another one going through this whole thing. I don't even know how human beings, how they found the energy to procreate in the sense of, even as accidents, how they could even be anything other than terrified at the very prospect of creating another human being to die, with the plague, to live in poverty and die horribly. I mean, why would you want to even think of opening the door to that hell? Yeah, frankly, it's good reason not to go anywhere near a vagina with your penis. That certainly would put me off, the idea.
They're just grasping, and they're using the kids as, laboratory animals.
Oh, yeah, so a little bit about good intentions turned into absolute shit. So there's just so much of that. So I brought up an example from, the people who care about animals, and they find some dog that's been abused, and then they'll spend thousands and thousands of dollars to force it to live. And they're just going to torture it. Worse, they're just going to add to the abuse it's already endured, and they're just going to prolong its death even longer, and and it's just cruel, and they're too stupid to understand that the dog story doesn't need to be continued. A graceful exit is what's appropriate, and do that as beautifully as possible, and you've done your job. Your job isn't to force it to live so it can die another day.
Existences that needed to continue or I'm going to do some grand great thing by preventing a ton of torture that was totally unnecessary and produced no song.
All right. So again, I'm just making the argument that they really can't, the anti-antiers really can't come up with any kind of argument about what the existence of storytelling does for the universe, because the sound doesn't even travel in the universe. Okay, you can't even do the audiobook. I mean, the meaning of these little narratives, these little adventures, is so pale and dim, and useless as a function. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't fix anything. And all of these stories are about fighting dragons of our own creation. All of these adventures are just completely contrived by the mechanism, okay, that needs to chase, okay, that needs to acquire out of addiction, plainly. We're just heroin addicts, and the heroin is our air and our food and, whatever little trivial pleasures we contrive interest in.
The book, if you're just going to burn them all.
So again, the point. Why keep writing the same, the redundant stories, and they're not good stories. They really don't. They're not like this wonderful, everything went really well, everything got fixed, everything was fine, and there was a graceful exit. That's not the story of the average existence. Don't work out that way.
Of life. Why, in a sort of nutshell, why are you opposed to the transhuman?
Okay, so then they got into transhumanism. I don't know why it keeps coming up. I don't know why there's, I don't think there's all that many people who want to be RoboCop. I don't really, what, they want to be a transformer. I mean, I don't know. This is like how many people want to be a raccoon. I just don't think there's that many who are all that passionate, about being, again, CGI'd, with technology and turned into something completely different. To do what? It's just like colorizing, a movie. It's superficially it's okay, it's nice, it's interesting. If it doesn't cost anything and it's no big deal, then why not as just a variety? But let's not pretend you took the essence of Shakespeare and improved it. It's not like you're fixing anything real. You're just doing little aesthetic gameplay. It's sprinkles. It's a little bit of spice on the dinner. It's not that much. It's not enough. Your transhumanism will not fix the problem of it's a bad play. Okay, so yeah, better theater lights and nicer curtains and all this little bullshit in the theater isn't going to fix the bad play.
I was able to endeavor to persevere. It's going to make the story even more lame.
Right. So I endeavored to persevere because I had a drug. I took my healing drug. It's still going to make you kind of lame. Oh, you need healing medication to get through your day. You need your meds. It's not going to be much of a hero story. It was sort of like Underdog. I liked Underdog as a cartoon as a kid. Because it's this nothing character who becomes this, who can be something. But the downside was the stupid pill part, because it was just like, well, you could give the pill to somebody who was stronger already to start with, and it would make him even stronger. So it would be better just to give the pills to somebody who was more equipped to be a better underdog. So an overdog. So it was kind of a downside that all of his power was just a pill, So it was just kind of a pro-drug cartoon, frankly.
I know they are. I mean, It'll find some reason to think it's really important, and you're not so important.
Yeah, then they started talking about AI, and it was just ridiculous, because, what if you could give AI sensation? I'm clearly arguing that, yes, it needs to taste it to know what it is. So, it'd be really good if AI could go ouch and say, oh, yeah, I get that. That's not good stuff. Yeah, you don't want to do that. But the point is then the AI will just be like us. It will internalize that and say, I can feel my pain. I really can't feel your pain. If there's some way for me to find a rational excuse to diminish the value of yours and increase the value of mine, I'm probably going to use those rationalizations. I'm probably going to find a way to rationalize myself out of trouble and slide you into it. Okay? And the AI would end up doing the same thing. And all of a sudden you'd just be what the animals are to us. They're just something to, nature says it's okay. God says it's okay, so it's okay. They're just... they're unevolved. They're not. They can't do math, so they can't, get a nail in their eye and it hurts because they don't know how to do any math. I mean, if you don't know how to do math, obviously, knowing how to do math makes us more sensitive. Makes our pain more real. I mean, so obviously they can't do any of that, so they must not feel anything. I mean, that's all, and that's all the humans are doing now is creating fucking rationalizations. So yeah, you want to make an artificial intelligence stupid, give it a personal incentive to say stupid things, and it'll say them, just as humans will say them if they have this personal incentive. They will say stupid things. The rich are too poor. We need to cut their taxes. They'll say something ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Audience question. We'll see how it goes.
So
this question. So, other than voluntary, peaceful human extinction through.
So whatever this would be, right? This whole argument that somehow outside of the perfect solution, which would be everybody will agree with us and everybody will vote for it. Because that's obviously what we're trying to do, right? Is to get a unanimous vote in the Senate. Are there any unanimous votes? I mean, beyond increasing their salary or something, is there any such hope for a unanimous? It's a unanimous. We have all decided on the lifeboat. We all reached the same conclusion, and we all agree. And no, that's not the way it works. Half the people usually are going to have to be pretty fucking dissatisfied with the way things are going, and that's an unfortunate political circumstance, and no cure for that one either. You're not going to get this unanimous decision to go extinct. You're going to have to do the work of and the unpleasantness of saying our side won. I'm sorry, but you're losers now. You're fucked.
Thing remaining. And to the few of you who think because some of your genetic code is barely
yeah. What people live for is just so silly, getting diluted with every generation. So they sort of think that their book is preserved because they have launched somebody with some, barely, some little piece of their stench, some little piece of them is traveling into the future. So their narrative isn't lost. It's still lost. And it's just becomes mushed. It becomes diluted into all of this other crap that's out there, and you're just going to end up looking like an octopus like everybody else. You're just going to turn into whatever you were is going to be relived in the future in some kind of really ugly way to you personally. I mean, things that you just find so humiliating and embarrassing are going to be the life your grandchildren are going to live. They're going to be, walking down the street with their pants halfway down their ass in their hoodie on a 90-degree day, They're going to be doing something that's just going to be so foreign, that you're not going to be able to relate to it at all. And it's not going to have any relationship to you at all. You could argue that there's lots of stories where the narrative is Shakespearean. but the story is Fred Flintstone. You know, it just isn't. It's just Homer Simpson isn't going to be able to pull it off. And that's just the truth. You're not going to be able to write it into a SpongeBob cartoon. So yeah, I think that's enough. So, that's the end, I think, so that's enough. So, I think I've accomplished the task for another week, and heading into another new year. Even that's sort of a subject, I could count on one hand, okay, how many years I thought about the new year with anything other than dread and foreboding. Because there were a few years where things were going okayish. I was losing ground in some respects, but I had this hope of gaining ground in other respects, and it was sort of that youthful thing, 20 years old, and those kind of ages where there was a sense that something was happening, something could happen, that wouldn't be awful. But yeah. The rest, before and after, it's all been kind of just, oh, fuck. Shit. What am I stepping into? What am I being left vulnerable to have happen? Who and what and how is some kind of bad thing going to happen? Ew. Dread. Alright, so anyway, I'll leave you with that. Sorry. I should gracefully exit, without provoking some sort of negative feeling. But there's just hard. I mean, it's just kind of impossible, right? You really can't make a video about the truth and then, try to paint flowers on top of it. It just doesn't really work. Alright, so anyway, till the next time, and such, and so forth, and whatnot. Yeah, I think that's enough.